Joining me now to talk more about Egypt's transition and what role the United States could or should play is Scott Bates, president of the Center for National Policy here in Washington. Did Burns strike the right tone in your estimation today?
I think he's doing the best that he can. I think the only thing that is uniting the factions in Egypt right now is their distaste for the United States of America. You've got every political bloc in Egypt upset with us, angry with us, and it's also they get political traction for poking at the U.S. So I think Burns has a very hard sell. I don't actually expect him to move the ball forward much at all on this visit, but it's important that we remain engaged.
You know, it's interesting you bring this up because during the Mubarak era, it seemed like the administration kind of waffled back and forth, weren't very popular then, not very popular this time, but it is a difficult needle to thread, isn't it?
You know, the Arab Spring, I thought the great promise of that was that for the first time in a long time, Arab populations would feel like they were in control of their own political destiny. For too long, they felt that they were subject to external forces like the U.S., like Israel, like England and France, if you go back decades. And, you know, there's still that hangover that folks in the Arab world believe that the U.S. is too involved in their own internal politics. And I think that's going to take a long time to unravel.
Scott, you just returned from Iraq. You've been involved with Iraq and Afghanistan. Any kernels of wisdom when they go through this kind of process? It's messy. It's not easy. Reconciliation, the big word we hear, that's a lot easier to say than it is to do. Your thoughts?
You know, I reminded my Iraqi friends that it took the United States about 7 years until after the end of our revolution to set up an actual functioning government. And that's with a lot of advantages. That's without sectarian strife. So this is going to be a long haul. There's no doubt about it. The only wisdom that I've picked up is I've done 25 trips to the Middle East, and every time I come back, I feel I know less than when I left before. It is incredibly complex. You've got all kinds of cross currents, and that should be a lesson for the U.S. too. There are no easy answers, but we have to remain engaged, but at a low level so as to not really heighten the resentment that's already there.
There seems to be two different messages too. We want reconciliation. We want the Muslim Brotherhood involved, and yet we're going to go out and arrest a bunch more of them. Those seems to be the two competing narratives. How do you make sense of those two?
It's
and
hard.
What should the United States be doing in terms of that?
Yeah, I think the U.S. just has to remain committed to the idea of democracy in Egypt, but it's going to be up to the Egyptian people to figure out what their path is. And in this particular instance, the U.S. really should think about conditioning assistance to getting Egypt back on a democratic process. So there's some in Congress that say we should just cut off all aid right now because it was a coup d'etat. I think the smarter thing to do, and maybe that's what Burns is doing behind the scenes, is saying, look, we'll continue the assistance, but you've got to commit to really trying to bring in as many people as possible into the political process.
Although there was an analyst I spoke to late last week who said that's really the only lever the U.S. has, the aid. So if it is cut off, they're kind of out of the ball game. So you can nudge them, but how much?
Well, it's interesting. We've never tried to use the lever. We never have cut off aid to Egypt. So I don't know how credible it is for the Egyptians to believe we're going to use the lever. The other thing to remember is Qatar, sorry, not Qatar, but the Saudis and the Emiratis have pledged $12 billion to Egypt. So what the U.S. gives is actually chump change compared to that.
Scott Bates dealing with jet lag, but joining us here tonight. We certainly appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Great to be with you. Thanks, Mike.